All right, check. Whoa, that's really reverby. Hello there. I'm in a cave. All right, that should be good. What's up, everyone? So, it's been a while since I've uploaded this channel. I hope everyone's still doing well. Things have been a little busy, so it's a little hard to come up with video ideas and find time to record these kind of videos, but I still want to be active on this channel, and I still want to make these videos because they're a lot of fun to make. So, whenever I have time, like right now I have some time, so I figured, why not just make a video right now? So today, specifically, I want to continue my little series on Music Theory 101, which is where I basically go from the basics of music theory and then just build our way up just to more and more complex topics. So in the beginning, of course, I start with intervals because that's the first thing I learned when I took AP Music Theory in high school. And then I went on to triads, using those intervals to build triads. And then I went on to using those intervals to build scales. And then eventually organizing those triads that we learned before into the scales and talking about diatonic harmony. And I think that's where I left off on last. Now I believe the next logical thing to talk about would be modes or modes of scales. So this whole video is going to be on modes, how to take a scale and organize it into its own specific modes. And I'm going to describe more of what a mode is in a little bit. But in this video, I'm going to talk about modes. I'm going to talk about some useful ways that composers use them, and some useful ways that you can use them in soloing if you're more of a soloing kind of player. So let's get started. Alright, so first of all, it's probably important to go over what exactly is a mode. So a mode is essentially, if you take a scale, so for example, we'll just take C major. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, just all the natural notes. Now if we take that scale, and how about we try organizing it in terms of which note we start with. So for example, if we start with C, C to C, of course that's just the major scale, but that also has its own mode name. It's also called Ionian mode. So from C to C, that would be considered the first mode of the major scale. Now how about if we started on the note D, so instead we go D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D. That would be considered the second mode of the major scale. That's going to be called Dorian mode, and it would sound something like this. So it sounds a little different if you start thinking about that as kind of a root note. So really quickly, I'm going to go through all of them. So you could pretty much do this starting on any note of the major scale. That effectively gives you 7 modes for the major scale, because of course there's 7 notes. So if we start on the first one, and I'm going to give you names for each one. Really, you could just call each one Mode 1, Mode 2, Mode 3. It's the same thing, as long as you know what exactly these are and where they come from. That's what's most important to me, because it's good to know. I noticed that when you learn the names, a lot of people will just learn a bunch of shapes, but they won't really understand where they come from. Just understand that they come directly from the major scale, and you're just starting with different notes each time. And so, like I said, first one is Ionian mode. It's just going to be straight up the bass major scale. So C to C. So if I played F Ionian, it's just going to be the F major scale. Next, like I said, we have Dorian mode. That's going to be the second mode of the major scale. That's in the key of C major. First, I'm going to show you everyone in the key of C major, or in relation to the key of C major. So, D Dorian, just C major scale, but starting on D. Now, a quick little shortcut to understand the basic shape of the scale. Like if I wanted to play, again, let's go to F Dorian. It's pretty much going to be the minor scale, if you know your minor scale shapes, except you're going to raise the 6th note. So F minor would be this. So for Dorian, all you're going to do is go. So that's the 5th note. We raise the 6th note. So that's going to be D natural. And continue on. So it'll sound something like this. Now let's go to Phrygian. So that's going to be playing the major scale, but starting on the 3rd note. So we have E, and that gets you that kind of sound. Now the other way to think about the scale, the little shortcut to think about the scale, is going to be the minor scale, but with a flat 2. So if we go back to F minor, but we flat the 2, so it's going to be that note instead. you get that really dark sounding scale. Next we got Lydian, which is going to be from F to F. Going from the darkest sounding scale to the brightest sounding scale. Well, second darkest sounding scale, technically, but darkest sounding scale to the brightest sounding scale, which is going to be Lydian. Now, for the shortcut for Lydian, we're actually going to use the major scale as a base. So if we go to, we just played F, so how about we play E Lydian? So if you know E major, if you want to play E Lydian, all you're going to do is raise the fourth note. And it gives you that nice, happy sound. Next up, we have a G Mixolydian, which is an interesting sounding one. So if I play that, it's going to sound like this. Now, Mixolydian is going to be the major scale. So if I play, let's play D Mixolydian this time. So if we play D major, Mixolydian is going to be the same thing as that, but you're going to lower the seventh note. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's the lowered 7, and you get that. Next mode's going to be Aeolian, which if you know the difference between relative major and minor modes, you know that the relative minor of C major is going to be A. Well, the sixth note of C major is A. If you play from A to A, that just gives you the minor scale, just without any alterations whatsoever. So Aeolian is just another way to say minor scale, essentially. Or Aeolian is the sixth mode of the major scale, which happens to be where the minor scale comes from. Last but not least, we got Locrian mode, which is probably the most rarely used one, and I think that would technically be considered the darkest scale in terms of the major modes anyway. So this is, of course, going from B to B, and it sounds like this. And then the little formula that we've been using for each mode that's going to be for the Locrian mode is going to be minor scale. So let's go back to F minor. But you're going to lower the 2 and you're going to lower the 5th. So then you get then the lowered 2, 3, 4, lowered 5th, then 6, 7, 8. So that is the 7 modes. So you got Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, and Locrian. So if you haven't already, I would suggest that you memorize those modes, not only memorize where they come from, like where they sit in the scale, know that Lydian is the 4th mode, and that Mixolydian is the 5th mode, and Dorian is the 2nd mode, and so on. It's important to know that, but it's also important to know what the little formula that I gave you is, because that's how you can pick it up really fast if you know your major and your minor scale shapes already. And that's one way that I like to organize the modes, is I will organize them into major modes and minor modes. So if you look at its general shape and you notice, like if I play Lydian, that mostly sounds like a major mode to me because it has a major third. It starts on a major triad. So in general, it has a majory kind of sound to it. So the way I organize it in my head, there's 3 major modes, there's 3 minor modes, and then you have Locrian mode, which is just its own thing. Now, of those categories, what you want to do is also figure out how they make you feel. Like when you play them, what kind of sound do they generally make? Major scale, everyone knows that's just the happy scale. That's probably the most familiar sound to most people. Same thing with minor scale, because that's really common. So now let's go into some of the newer sounds. So here we have Dorian mode. I'm just going to play C Dorian. So it does sound minory, but to me, that kind of sounds a little less sad than minor. So minor we know is like the sad, just emotional scale. I think that 1/6 note that's lowered makes it really a lot more darker. So when you raise it, it actually doesn't sound as sad anymore. Actually, it kind of softens it. I know one common chord progression that comes directly from the Dorian sound is going to be C minor, or 1 minor, going to 4 major. Because if you listen to that, the first chord sounds sad, of course, because it's a minor scale, or minor chord, then you go to that, and that kind of softens it. So then it's not as emotional. Next we have Phrygian, which has this kind of sound. Now I would consider this darker than the minor scale because it has that one first note. And that's why you see it really commonly used in metal songs. In metal songs you commonly see this movement. That movement going from the flat 2 to the 1. And that's pretty much hinting at Phrygian mode. After that we got Lydian, which is considered the brightest mode. And I agree with that. I think it's much brighter than the major scale. Lydian, to me, Lydian has always sounded like the beginning of a movie, like you're beginning an adventure. It's very up-tempo and bright, and like it's very up-tempo and bright and like triumphant, like we're starting a new journey and this is the beginning of the story or something. That's what the sound reminds me of when I hear Lydian. Now Mixolydian, I consider Mixolydian to be the darkest of the 3 major sounds. Now this is one of those sounds that's kind of like the border between minor and major. So to me it sounds bluesy naturally, because blues is kind of like the bridge between minor and major sounds. It's a little bright and it's a little dark at times. Then after Mixolydian, Aeolian, that's just minor scale, which I described as the more sad kind of dark scale. And then we have Locrian. If we're sticking to the C modes, if we play C Locrian, that's going to be your home chord, or your 1 chord. So typically it's not used that often because a lot of people don't find that as a pleasant sound to end on. Because generally when you hear that sound, it makes you want to go like that, but that wouldn't be Locrian mode then. You would have to end here for it to be considered Locrian mode. Although there are some interesting pieces that do use Locrian mode that actually make it sound pretty nice, and I would suggest you look some of them up. So now the next question you might be wondering is, why do we learn about these? Why do we do these with scales when we already have the base scale? Well, the main reason is just to get different sounds out of them, because you could hear each one sounds drastically different. And the thing that composers have used them for is, one, they'll compose entire pieces using those modes. So they'll essentially just think of the one note that the mode starts on, like for example the Dorian mode being like the second note mode. Bleh. So for example, like Dorian mode, the second note, and the major scale being, they'll just think of that as being the root note essentially. There's plenty of examples of modal pieces. I know one of the first major rock modal pieces was Joe Satriani's Flying in a Blue Dream. That's in Lydian mode predominantly. We also have a newer one is Chon. We have Fluffy, which, let's see if I even remember how to play it. Almost got it all until the end. But yeah, those are some Lydian songs. Dorian is another pretty common one. I know Thriller by Michael Jackson has a lot of Dorian sounds into it. Like they do a lot of C sharp minor into F sharp major. Phrygian mode, like I said, a lot of metal metal riffs has Phrygian sounds just inherently in it. A lot of Metallica riffs, a lot of Symphony of Destruction. That's one I can think of on the top of my head. That's uses Phrygian sounds because it's just that. I don't have a distortion sound right now, but those are the chords. So it's just going from that flat 2 to the 1 immediately. So that's pretty much what composers do. They'll emphasize those unique sounds that each mode has, and they'll utilize that to describe whatever kind of emotion they're trying to convey in the piece that they're writing. That's really the point of music theory, is to really just explore different sounds that make you feel, different emotions. And then if you have a song that you want to describe like a certain situation, or you wanted to have some kind of theme with it in which that sound just so happens to fit perfectly, and then it makes it a lot easier to write that song. One more thing, for those who are getting into jazz soloing or getting into just any kind of soloing whatsoever, it's really common, and rock is really common as well, to play Dorian over a lot of sounds. So if you're just playing like a jam over like some basic chord like that, you can play, you know, your typical minor scale stuff, but you can also add Dorian sounds to it. So you see I was kind of mixing that with like blues scale and pentatonic scale. You could do stuff like that, and that could just be like another flavor you add in to your leads. Now when it comes to jazz soloing, typically what a lot of, especially nowadays with fusion bands, a lot of jazz fusion bands will do, they will basically, they see a minor 7 chord, like D minor 7, they immediately play Dorian mode over it. And the reason why they do that is because all the natural notes that sound really good against a minor chord, like all the natural extensions, you have the root, 3rd, 5th, 7th, and then 9th, and then the 11th, the natural 11th, and the natural 13, which actually doesn't come in the minor scale. So you get all those extensions. Those are what sounds good, and that's what outlines a Dorian, outlines the Dorian mode. So that's why they just immediately play Dorian mode over a lot of minor 7 chords. Same thing goes for major 7 chords. A lot of times when fusion players see a major 7 chord, they immediately play Lydian over it. Like that's C major 7. Because it's the same logic. All the best sounding extensions that go with a major chord are going to be the root, 3rd, 5th, that's your bass notes, plus the major 7th. And then you have the 9th. And actually the next one's going to be a sharp 11, which again comes from Lydian mode. Now if you were to play all that plus a natural 11, you get that lovely chord. So that's why we typically avoid playing the natural 11. We play the sharp 11, which is of course coming from Lydian mode. And then lastly, of course, you get the natural 13. So all the extensions that work with that are going to be all those. So that's why general rule in jazz, if you see a minor 7 chord, you play Dorian, and you see a major 7 chord, you play Lydian. Now, of course, you don't always have to do that, but that's just typically how people think of it. So I believe that's all I have for today. I went on a little longer than I thought it would. We'll see how long the video is once I cut everything down, but recording took a little while. There's a lot of information there. So I hope that you got something out of this and you learned something new today. And going beyond the major scale, if you think about it, every single scale technically has modes. So, you know, even harmonic minor, melodic minor, what's a crazy scale? I don't know. Double harmonic major, yeah, that has modes as well. So this is not something that just applies to the major scale. This has been done with every scale. So that just goes to show how many different sounds you have to work with just from one scale. If you didn't know any of that, I suggest you learn those modes, figure out where they come from in the major scale, as well as its formula. Like Lydian is major with a sharp 4, Dorian mode being a minor scale with raised 6, and so on with all the other ones. And then once you figure them out, really try to mess around with their sounds. Try to understand what exactly each sound sounds like to you and where you want to use it. And even try maybe writing some riffs or trying to write some of your own material using these modes, because it gets some really interesting sounds into your playing. But anyway, that is all I have to say for this video right now. So let me know what you think in the comments and all that, and like the video or don't. I really don't care at this point. Yeah, and thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next one.